All right, we should be live. Tiffany,
Hi. Hello, how are you?
welcome back. Welcome back. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
This is insane. Thank you so much. I like it already was psychotic for you to come on the stream once, but coming on the stream twice is
Yeah.
is so exciting and brings a lot of attention to an election that I think a lot of people forget about.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, and it's so frustrating. Primaries are almost like more important than generals a lot of the time,
Mhm.
especially in Texas, where so much of our government is dominated by Republicans. Primaries actually give us an opportunity to
Choose
pick between
yeah.
Republican candidates,
Yeah.
and then also pick between Democratic candidates. Like primaries are just so important, and I feel like a lot of people kind of forget about them. And so you being here does really help bring a lot of attention to an oftentimes overlooked election. Right here at the top, though, we're going to talk about school takeover stuff.
Mhm.
Beaumont ISD was just taken over, which is insane, taken over because of just two failing school districts. And the superintendent of Beaumont ISD was just announced to be
Mhm.
Sandy Massey, who worked with Mike Miles during the Houston ISD takeover, which has been
Yes.
an insane story. And you've been talking to people who are in Houston right now, dealing with Mike Miles and kind of getting a feel for what Sandy Massey's leadership might be like because she worked
Mhm.
with him. What's going on in Houston ISD right now?
Yeah, so I actually just got off the phone with somebody who has a lot of insight into Houston ISD. And I'm so glad that I had this conversation with him just before our live. Um, because it allowed me the opportunity to share the information that I've learned about Houston ISD. So the just for some context, the I've talked to many people, uh, teachers, parents, people have messaged me, or former teachers of Houston ISD, parents, community members. And they have all kind of corroborated what this person said. So this person he's a former teacher of Austin ISD. He also worked for Pflugerville ISD. He lives in the Austin area. And he is working on his PhD in education policy. And I'm looking down because I'm looking at my notes. When he was talking, I was taking notes like I was in class. Okay, um, education policy with a focus on accountability is his dissertation topic. And so because of that, for the past 2 years, 2003 was, or really longer, I guess, when 2003, 23 is when Houston ISD was taken over. Um, he has interviewed over 150 people, from principals, parents, community members, um, local politicians, like all sorts of people. Um, so we have a playbook that we have. I mean, there's good news and bad news. The good news, the bad news. Let's start with there. The bad news is this is bad.
Always the bad
This
news
is
first.
this is bad. Yeah. This is not going to be good for Beaumont. I wish it were. I wish it were about the students and helping the students, but this is bigger than one school district takeover. This is very political, and it's very much part of a long game plan. And but the good news is that we do have a playbook, because everything that they're doing is so regimented that it is the same thing over and over. So we can simply look at what is happening in Houston ISD for the past 2 years, and even what is happening in Fort Worth ISD, which just got taken over a month ago. Um, we can follow that same pattern here, and that way we can know what to expect. But what we can expect is pretty grim. So,
Yeah, well, already we're seeing elements of the strategy that was rolled out. They call it NES, which is not
mm-hmm.
Nintendo Entertainment System. It's New Education System, I think, is what it stands for.
Yes.
It's called
Um,
NES, and that got rolled out in Houston ISD, and we're already seeing elements of that here in Beaumont, where all these Beaumont teachers got sent, this PowerPoint talking about how they've got to have their desks in a very specific spot. They have to teach with their doors open, which I thought I thought safety standards now, because of all these
mm-hmm.
school shootings, is to have your doors
That's
closed.
that's the recommendation. Yeah. So the loophole is that the door is like in the locked mode. Like, you know how the door can be open, but you put it on locked mode, right? Like that way, if I shut the door, I'm locked. It's already locked, right? So that's their loophole, is that the doors are locked but open. So if there was an event of a safety situation where you had to go on lockdown, you just simply have to shut the door real quick. But that's where the locked but open comes in, which a lot of people are confused about, because it is worded kind of like locked but open.
Weird.
But the reason why the doors have to be opened is because surveillance. This is a very much a system that is surveillance of teachers to make sure that they are not deviating from the plan, not deviating from lessons, not going outside of the new education system model. It's very dystopian. It reminds me of Dolores Umbridge from from
Harry Potter.
Such a silly, nerdy. I'm a nerd, but I hate to make such a silly comparison. But it's almost comical. It's almost comical how close it is.
Yeah. And Umbridge is modeled after ways that fascistic administrations persecuted minority communities by instituting frivolous rules that made them conform to ridiculous standards, all so that the people who were in power made sure to remind people that you're under my thumb, you're under my power right now. And it does feel like these people are just high on their own supply, that they're so excited to finally have power over public schools that they want to make sure that everybody feels that. And it's scary to see, not only like the way that they're regimenting these schools now. I mean, like literally in Houston ISD, they have like scripts that they give to teachers that they have to read from. And so you're seeing teachers leave, thousands at a time. More than 3,000 teachers have left Houston ISD, and thousands of students. So
willingly or not willingly, with teachers. So it seems as if the goal is to make teachers obsolete. It seems like that's the long-term goal. So can I tell you a little bit about like what I learned with regard to how the national education system was established?
Please.
Okay, so the goal is to establish a new education system. That is the person I talked to. That is like what he said right off the bat. The goal is to establish a new education system. And I kind of talked about this in one of my recent videos about how Mike Miles, first, when he established this, it didn't go over well in Dallas ISD, and that had an elected board. So he basically resigned.
Right. Yeah, he had to resign.
He had to resign, from what I have told, it was a resignation because he was not, he was not going to be wanted for the next year. That is my understanding. So what he did next is he went and he opened Third Future Schools, and that's the charter company. That was in 2016. So from 2016 to 2023, Third Future Schools is kind of his model to implement his education policy, his instruction policies, his educational philosophy, if you will. And then the takeover happens. Mike Morath appoints him Houston ISD superintendent. And now, because there's not an elected board to stop him, like in Dallas ISD, he's able to go to town on his philosophy. So what is his philosophy? Well, Mike Miles has a military background. And I did bring this up, but I didn't want to focus on that because, lots of people start off in the military. It's a respectable thing to do. Nothing absolutely wrong with doing that. However, in this particular case, the military did inform his, the guy I talked to who has been studying this for 2 years, the military did inform his education policy. So the structure that they're creating, that they implement in Houston ISD, and that is now being implemented in Fort Worth ISD and Beaumont ISD and also Lake Worth ISD, is based on military doctrine. They are using military occupation strategies as their model. And I know it sounds conspiratorial. I'm picturing the meme of that guy where he's in front of the court board. You know what I'm talking about? And he's like,
Charlie Day from Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Okay, I'm not good with pop culture. I need to watch that movie so I can.
I'm nerd about TV shows.
So, but this is documented. So it's built on a system to compel people to follow orders. And now you and I were kind of talking about this earlier, and you brought up, like, I mean, that is a lot of public school, how it is built. And this is just kind of that on steroids. So to the point that teachers are given very scripted lessons. The lessons are color coded for the day of the week. The reason why the teachers, and if you're in Beaumont ISD and you're a teacher, like, this is really, I hope you're paying attention to just this, just so that you know, because I'm sounding the 5 alarm fire. So if you are caught playing music, if you speak, I'm looking at my notes right now. If you speak critically at a board meeting, if they walk by your room and you're off task on the lesson. So by off task, what we mean is the lessons have to be timed a certain way. They have to move forward a certain way. Now, as a classroom teacher, I know that sometimes you can plan a lesson, and then depending on the needs of the students or what's going on in class that day, sometimes
the amount of questions that students are asking that you have to answer, like, how can you plan it down by the minute? That's ridiculous.
Yeah. So, and in a normal classroom, like, students ask questions. They're thinking, they're learning. That's part of an education, right? And so teachers are flexible, and teachers, it's almost an art that teachers have the ability to curate. I might teach the same lesson, the same skill, 5 different ways to 5 different class periods, depending on the just dynamic of that class period, right? But in this way, you have to not just read the same lesson, but you have to be on the right day. So let's say all of Monday's lessons are red, all of Tuesday's lessons are blue, and that's the PowerPoint. So if it's a Tuesday and it's blue, right? The PowerPoint's blue, and they walk by your room and the PowerPoint's orange, they know you're on a different lesson. That teacher has now a mark against them. If they come into your room and you are teaching, but you're off pace for where the lesson needs to be, say in a 45-minute class period, then that's a mark against you. The administrators will actually, by administrators, we don't mean our local administrators. We mean the people that are part of their program, right? Maybe Sandy Massey herself, this is part of her job, is to publicly shame teachers. So their model is very much built on public shame of teachers. And they will correct the teacher in front of their class to kind of instill that sense of subordination. Give correction to the teacher in front of students. Yes. So it is to undermine the teacher and instill a school culture of teachers being subordinate to this new education system. Talk about a teacher like struggling to teach their classroom, corral these kids. We know that kids are, a little insane in schools today. Talk about these kids lose all respect for any teacher in a classroom once the superintendent or whoever, one of their lackeys, walks in and berates them in front of a class full of teenagers. How does that teacher now? No wonder 3,000 teachers have left Houston ISD schools. Yeah. Well, and then and there's another reason why teachers are leaving. Some of them are leaving because of teacher jail. And so if you're in Beaumont ISD, I need you to listen to this. I need you to listen to this. Teacher jail? Teacher jail? So I don't know if that's what they call it, but that's what they call it. I don't know if that's what new education system Mike Miles and his people call it. I don't know what they're officially calling it, but that's what they were calling it in Houston ISD inner circles. And that's what and again, I want to emphasize, this is a guy who has been studying this for 2 years. He's writing his PhD on education policy with a focus on accountability. So that's why he's been interviewing over 150 people from this district. Okay, so teacher jail, let's talk about that. So first of all, we need to make sure everybody understands that teachers in Texas are under a contract. And so for a teacher to be fired, it has to be voted on by the board. And usually what happens, if a teacher will just not have their contract signed for the next year, but they'll still finish out the school year, right? Because it is a process to fire a teacher because they're under contract. So 2 things that they do. One, they change board policy. I'll get to that in a second because I want to talk about teacher jail first. The second is, what if somebody quits on their own? That's what, right? Because how convenient for them. How convenient for them. So what they did, this is, and I'm reading from my notes from the conversation that I had with him. If teachers, for example, deviate from the lesson, speak critically of the board, like say even at a board meeting or on social media, anywhere, if they play music in their classroom, that's one of the rules, no music. If they have a light off, like if they dim the lights, because that's, any of these rules, if they break any of these rules, then the teacher is removed from the classroom indefinitely. They put a sub in that room and they take the teacher to, when he was first describing it to me, it sounded like it was like a training, like, well, are they training them to giving them professional development training so that they do better or something like that. That would still be wrong, I guess, in this sense, but it would make more sense. But it's worse than that. So they brought them to a building that the district owns, is what he told me. It's a windowless classroom. They're in a cubicle. And so I was like, so are they given, like, what are they doing in that cubicle for 8 hours a day? Nothing. They don't have tasks and they can't communicate with other teachers. It's a form of psychological warfare to get them to quit on their own. Yeah.
What?
This is well documented in Houston ISD that this has happened.
That's insane. Have you seen Severance?
I haven't.
It's a great TV show, and you need to watch Severance. But in Severance, It's kind of this psychological thriller show where they're in a workplace, and if they misbehave, they take them to the break room, which is, you don't want to go to the break room because they take you to the break room and they make you apologize for whatever they perceive was your, wrongdoing over and over and over again while you're attached to a lie detector test until they can detect that you mean that you're actually sorry. This sounds like the break room from Severance. Like, it's psychological warfare against these teachers. Lock them in a windowless room and put them in a cubicle to do nothing.
He told me that there's a video he's going to send me, and I'll post it as soon as I have it. But apparently, one teacher spoke out against it, and there was, I guess words exchanged. Ultimately, resulted in them calling Houston ISD police to remove them for trespassing. Because so you're telling them to come here, but now they disagree with you, and well, now you're trespassing. Anyway. But the goal is to get them to quit. Now, then the question I asked is, okay, so you get all these teachers to quit. How are you going to staff your school? Well, there are people who need a paycheck, right? And they're not necessarily educators. Those of us who are teachers know that it's very much also a vocation. I know we always hear that phrase, teachers are in it for the income and not the outcome. And I hate that phrase just because it's used to excuse low teacher pay. However, it does have truth to it in that teachers are very much passionate about being educators. That's why they become teachers. Think about famous teachers like Mr. Feeney from Boy Meets World. That's his life's work. He is a teacher, right? So teachers are passionate. Teachers teach from the heart. And especially when they love also their subject matter. I'm an English teacher. I get really into it when I teach literature. I used to read the Odyssey and out loud to my students, and I loved being the Cyclops from the Polyphemus the Cyclops. Anyway, but if you are just in it for a paycheck, then there's no problem to just read from the slides. And you also don't have to be certified. You don't have to really be an educator, be have a, teachers, teacher education programs teach you pedagogy and best practices. You don't have to do any of that. And all your job is to read from slides. So they can hire literally anybody who just needs a paycheck that isn't a certified teacher that is willing to just read to a slide. Because teachers who are passionate, they're not going to do that. They'll quit before they do that, right? They'll go find a job elsewhere. So now you just hire random people and who will comply? Who will comply?
And it's so sad. I mean, you hear stories coming out of Houston ISD about teachers who have been teaching for 16, 20 years that are leaving because who wants to deal with this hell in their workplace? Yeah. And so they move on and they leave a career that they love and that kids loved them. Like, you talk about teachers teaching is just one of the most thankless jobs in the country, but especially in Texas where teachers are so underpaid and schools are so underfunded that you got to love, doing it to be in that position and to have to leave your life's work, what gives you the most fulfillment in life because you don't want to go to teacher jail is horrifying. Some thanks that these poor teachers sacrifice their lives, their money. How many teachers are spending their own personal money to decorate their classrooms and buy their kids supplies? And this is the thanks that they get.
Yeah, and teachers do it because they love the kids. They're in it for the kids. They want kids to learn. So the way that they're going to, the goal is for this to spread out across the whole state. And that's where Bluebonnet curriculum connects. Bluebonnet curriculum, for those that don't know, but those who are in the education world are probably very much familiar. It was passed by the Texas legislature and pushed by Greg Abbott and Mike Morath. And Bluebonnet curriculum is state written, curriculum for like the different grades. It is Bible infused in the English language arts. That's been a big controversy. Also a big controversy is that it has a lot of like just errors, like they didn't proofread anything.
More than 4,000.
4,000, yep, 200, yeah. But the big red flag with Bluebonnet that I'm now piecing together, because before we were kind of all focused on the Bible passages and stuff, and I'm not saying that's not problematic in a public school. However, it's kind of a distraction because the bigger issue here is that Bluebonnet is very, very scripted. And now what does that sound like? It sounds like what we've just been talking about with the new education system. And now if you're being taken over, and then they can force the new education system on you. Bluebonnet, also scripted, they are incentivizing districts to adopt that curriculum. So if you're a district that's struggling I think it's like $60 per student. So if you're a district that is struggling financially, which is a lot of districts, let's be honest, in Texas right now, then you're going to adopt that state curriculum and take that financial incentive. So now you have teachers bound to, but this time by choice, not by TEA takeover, to scripted lessons. Yeah, there's no teacher jail and it's not that, but it's the same model that they're trying to spread. And then what they're trying to do to establish this new education system model, this very militarized education model across the state, because right now they're working with the framework within the law, which says that they can take over districts that have a failing campus. So that even now it's supposed to be reserved for a nuclear option, and they're not using as a nuclear option but they technically can by law. They have the scores to show that so they have put their finger on the scale and kind of manipulated the scores, and that's a whole other thing that we could go into. But they basically are going to show, oh, look, these schools went up to an A-rated campus, right?
Right.
So now this is a miracle. We took Houston ISD and look how we turned it around. And they're going to present that as I guess, what is the word for, like, if it's like an invention, like prototype, I guess, I don't know.
Sure.
The word's escaping me, but you know what I'm talking about, right? They're going to present that as the model for why other districts should adopt it. So there are lots of districts across the state that, like the district my kids go to, they're not at any risk of ever being taken over by TEA within the existing law, because they're not close to failing any of the campuses, right? And there's a lot of districts in Texas that are like that. They're fine. However, they do want this to spread to other districts. So they're going to like incentivize them. They're going to show the results that they have manipulated to say, here's why it works. Here's why you should adopt it. Therefore, we would have like a unified, what they're going to say, their language, unified education system structure. And if you don't, and here's the key, and if you don't like it, if you don't like the way the government schools are run, take it to the market. Take it to a private school. Take it to a charter.
Right.
Enter, stage right, Greg Abbott's voucher plan.
Yeah.
See how it's all connected?
100%. Because that's exactly what's happened at Houston ISD. Thousands of kids have left the schools and are flooding into private schools and charter schools in the area. I mean, we don't have good data on where they're going because we don't have any good data on private and charter school, at least we don't have any good data on private school demographics. But they've left Houston ISD, and they've even tried to do that at Houston ISD. They tried to pass that bond in Houston to renovate these new schools that they're planning on closing in just a couple of years. And people in Houston were talking like, yeah, they want to update these schools so that they can close it in a couple of years and it'll be worth more so that they can sell it to private schools and charter schools, because they're taking these public school systems, and as they make them more horrible and get teachers and students to flee them, they can sell them for parts. It's ridiculous.
Yep. And so that's how, when you say they want to dismantle public education, you sound conspiratorial. People, will kind of write that off when you word it that way. And so that's why I think it's important to break down what they're doing, because the Texas Constitution guarantees a public education. That's in our Constitution, and that goes back to Marabou v. Lamar, right? And we have the generational guarantee of funding schools with the permanent school fund, which is generated from oil and gas revenue. Like, that's a whole thing that the founders of Texas, for all their flaws, that's one thing that they established, right? Texas is public education. But we know that the far right, not just in Texas, but across the U.S., look at our U.S. Department of Education, Linda McMahon, right? They don't want public education to exist. They don't want public good to exist, and they think it's a form of socialism. I'm sure libraries are next on the chopping block, but I'm going to stay on topic. So
they've already closed libraries at Houston ISD.
Yes,
they spent $9 million on libraries and then closed them all.
They turn them into detention centers because that's part of this new education system model. Yeah. So all of that to say that. Okay, wait, hold on. I lost my train of thought. Can you take me back to where we were a second ago?
Houston ISD, and they're manipulating the test score so that they can continue to spread their new strategy all over the state.
Okay, yeah. So I remember now. So you can't just take away public schools through legislation in Texas,
right?
Just like simple, we don't have public schools anymore. You can't do that because that's in our Texas Constitution. It's guaranteed. So the way they're doing it is by ensuring that nobody wants to go to them, and that the only people that will want to go to a public school in Texas are the people that have no other choice. And is that? That's the low socioeconomic, right? Predominantly underserved communities that don't have the option to go, because public school provides transportation. Not everybody has a vehicle. Some people, work they rely on that transportation. They rely on the free breakfast and lunch programs. That helps their family out. Even if they get voucher money, that doesn't mean that they can afford private school, because private school also comes with a lot of fees, a lot of, it's expensive.
Transportation, lunch.
Transportation. Yeah. So now you have the people in Texas, and this is the goal, these underserved communities, that their only option now is the government school, right? And their government school is very much modeled after the military, and the new education system is compelling people to follow orders. That's what it's built on. So you can see where this is going. Our elected officials, they send their kids to private school, and in those private schools they're going to get a great education where they have robust classroom discussions of literature and all of these
they're not taking
the
STAAR test in private schools.
Exactly. And the working class kids, they are the ones that are subject to these military type schools, because that's the public school option. And then what happens to the class divide?
100%.
Yeah.
Well, and not just like something that's like planned to happen in the future. Like, this is happening right now. Like, more than I think the latest statistic is more than 70% of Texas public school students are economically disadvantaged, and more than 60% of Texas public school students are Black or Hispanic. Like, we have less than a quarter of Texas public school students are white in a state that's 40% white. You already see huge racial segregation that's happening in Texas public schools, and you already see that the vast majority of people who avail themselves of public schools in Texas are economically disadvantaged people, and the people who can afford it are sending their kids off to private school, and all the voucher program has done is made it easier for them to do that.
Yeah, it's given them a coupon. I think the research showed that most people that used the voucher were already enrolled in private school. So it hasn't actually lifted anyone out of a school district that they might otherwise not want to go to. Of course, and that gets into the problem with the voucher program, is that we should be making all of our public schools good. But anyway, that would be a separate conversation. But you can clearly see what they're doing here with regard to, making the public schools as torturous as possible. You don't have to get rid of public schools. You just have to make it to where nobody wants to go to them unless they have no choice. And those people that have no choice can now be indoctrinated into this, military type academy, basically. And then also there's an AI component that's coming into all this.
Yes.
So Future 2 schools in Houston that they're introducing. And this is also what the person I spoke to has told me about. And this goes into rendering teachers obsolete, right? So Mike Miles, I don't know if Mike Miles started it. Someone started this thing called Alpha Schools. So it's this private school that costs $40,000 a year or a semester, one of the two, very expensive. And this was how they tested out this model that's now being implemented into Houston ISD, which we know that if it's going to be implemented in Houston ISD, it's coming to Beaumont ISD, right? And
Sure.
Fort Worth ISD. But I'm focused on Beaumont ISD because that's home here. And that's Future 2 schools. So what are these AI schools? So the first 2 to 4 hours, I'm reading my notes again. The first 2 to 4 hours is AI assisted core subjects. So I guess your core subjects would be your English, math, science, and social studies, right? AI assisted core subjects, 2 to 4 hours on a computer. You don't need a teacher. And then after that, they market it as you go and do these projects, like these STEM projects, like build an engine and things like that sound really good. But ultimately, these teachers, these schools, they don't have teachers. They just have proctors. And it's part of their broader plan to render teachers obsolete. It sounds very dystopian. Again, I sound like I'm talking about the plot of a science fiction book. But
it's very Orwellian.
Yes.
Like 1984, sitting in your computer, letting your computer tell you what you're supposed to do all day, every day.
Yeah. Needless to say, 1984 is not part of the recommended state mandated reading list that they're trying to push in the State Board of Education.
Of course it's not. But the Bible is, though. Uh-oh. I think we might have lost you. Uh-oh. Test. 1, 2, 3. While we're waiting for Tiffany to reconnect here. Is that everybody? Is that just me? Is that her? While we're waiting on Tiffany to reconnect here, I wanted to remind people that we are going to be taking questions. Hey, there she is.
There we go. Froze up.
We lost you. We lost you for just a second. I was saying that we are going to be taking some questions at the end of the stream. So just make sure that you're. I've seen a couple of questions in chat so far. Make sure you're putting those there so that we can address some of your concerns directly. Tiffany, like we said at the beginning, you're running for State Board of Education.
Mm-hmm. Yes. What runoff? Yeah.
What ability do you have to help this horrible sounding situation? Do you have like State Board of Education oversees curriculum primarily? Mm-hmm. So what can you do to help push back against these state takeovers like this?
Yeah, so there's what the State Board of Education does, and then there's the rooms and the conversations that being in the State Board of Education allows you to have influence over. So those are kind of two different things, but they both serve the office of State Board of Education, right? Can be used as kind of a megaphone to advocate, right? So officially what the State Board of Education does, 3 things. We approve, I say we, look, I'm manifesting over here.
We, it's going to be we.
We approve curriculum and write the TEKS, the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. So writing the curriculum and then approving curriculum that teachers or schools are allowed to purchase with state funds. And the current makeup of State Board of Education, so there's 10 Republicans and 5 Democrats, and the Republicans, especially the ones that are further to the right, including the incumbent I'm running against, are very, very, very pro-Bluebonnet, and we can see why, having gone over all that we've gone over. And then the other thing is the permanent school fund, and that one is a little bit more complicated, but basically, like we were kind of talking about earlier, Texas has an endowment to ensure that every generation of Texas students will always have their schools funded, and it's based on revenue from oil and gas. And so the State Board of Education is kind of responsible for doling out that money to the districts that then they can use. but it's based on like, it's not something the State Board of Education actually maybe necessarily does to like increase the money, because it's based on oil and gas revenue. But anyway, really the two big ones is curriculum and writing the TEKS. So we're seeing right now, like the social studies and how they're rewriting the TEKS, how important the role is, because they're able to just try to put nonsense in it and then try to have that voted on. But with regard to the state takeovers, the State Board of Education is a very visible role, and it is a role that is responsible for advocating for the districts in your area. So, for example, District 7, the one that I'm running for, that's 11 counties. So I'm in Jefferson County. There's like Orange, Hardin County, Newton, Jasper, Liberty, Fort Bend, Brazoria, Galveston. Anyway, so then within those counties, there's all these school districts, and just kind of like being that contact person for the superintendents, and being involved in the school, and you're a visible person, you're an elected office, right? And that's kind of what I'm seeking to do. I hope that I'm doing that now, because I do view running for office as kind of like you're running for, or you're interviewing for a job, right? When you're campaigning, you're interviewing for a job, so you want to act as if you already have the job. So I've been going to the school board meetings. I went to Beaumont ISD meeting when Andrew Kim was first named the conservator of the district, because the conservator they appoint is different than the superintendent. Right. And I spoke at the Beaumont ISD meeting, and this was, the elected board was still in place because the takeover was still pending. And this was when they had extended the Board of Managers application several times, and it was causing a lot of instability, and nobody was getting answers. And so I spoke to the elected board during public comment, and Andrew Kim was in the room, and really I'm talking to him. Like, basically, I see you, I know what you're doing. And whenever you're able to say, I'm a candidate, people pay attention, right? More. And so because you are a visible person and you do have a platform. And so that is also what the office, gives you that voice to advocate for these teachers and for these communities. So even though you don't necessarily directly affect policy on these issues, you are an advocate. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. You have the ability to bring more attention to certain issues and to reshape narratives, because the narrative right now, and a narrative that I've seen a lot of people really resonating with here in Beaumont, is state takeovers are for failing school districts to help increase their academic performance. And I can tell you, most people here in Beaumont are, whenever they hear that the state is taking over BISD, they're thinking it's about time, because BISD has never been known for their, they haven't exactly been the pinnacle of academic performance.
Right.
And so what do you say to people who think that actually the TEA coming in and taking over the school district helps get the school district back on track? These teachers, they've gotten lax, and so they need this new level of kind of rigid environment. You are seeing in Houston ISD, you're seeing STAAR testing results, go up. Yeah. That's what, Mike Miles has made a lot of hay about that, because he's seen that as a demonstration that NES is successful.
Yeah. So what I would say to those people is that, and what I have been saying, I wish it were true that a TEA takeover was about the kids and was about fixing things. And maybe when that law was written into, that legislation they're working with that allows for a TEA takeover, that was probably originally the intent. When I'd have to look up when that was written. But that was probably the intent at that time. 10 years ago, Beaumont ISD was taken over for financial mismanagement under a different educational commissioner. And that was a different situation. It was a different political climate. It was a different, again, educational commissioner who was appointed by the governor. This is not that, because this is bigger than that. This is very much political. And it's very much about instilling and using these underserved communities, these struggling school districts, oftentimes predominantly Black and brown communities, because, they're always the first lamb to the slaughter, right? In multiple different areas of politics, not just education. as their testing ground for this thing that they want to eventually have spread across the state and probably eventually into the whole, United States, because we know Linda McMahon is, an advocate, a proponent for all of this as well. She donated a lot of money in the last election cycle to my, after the runoff, who will be my opponent, the incumbent. She got a lot of money from Linda McMahon, like $5,000, which I guess for them that's not a lot of money, but I mean it's $5,000, $5,000 in a campaign.
Yeah,
right?
100%, especially in smaller races like this.
Yes, and so I think on the outside, to somebody who hasn't looked into all this, it does look as if. Look, I worked for Beaumont ISD for a while, and there were some issues. There was more than just some issues. Like there was a lot of things that I, took issue with, that I would raise concern about. But this is not the way, because this is not them trying to fix anything. This is them using the existing law as a entry point, a Trojan horse, if you will, if y'all catch that metaphor, to again instill and test out the new education system, this militarized model. Now, as far as the results, the scores going up, like you mentioned, that is true on paper. The scores do appear to have gone up, and some schools have gone up to like an A rating, or they've improved in their rating system. But what they have, so we have to understand what those scores and what that rating system represents. They represent passing a government obedience test. Yes, the scores are going to go up if your entire school model is built on spending all of this time enforcing compliance, enforcing robotic teaching, and training kids to pass the government test. But is that a quality education? Because again, our elected officials aren't putting their kids through this. They're sending their kids to private school to have, again, literature discussions and hands-on learning and all of these things, and teachers that don't have to follow a script and that can teach from the heart and with passion. That's what they're sending their kids to. So does a rating really matter on paper if all you have taught the kids is to pass a government test? That's the question that I ask in return.
And we all know how terrible STAAR is. Everybody, Republicans and Democrats alike, hate the STAAR test. Imagine what school is doing to a kid whenever the entirety of school now is just dedicated completely to getting your kid ready to pass STAAR. Like, what level of education is that? 100%. And we've seen so many students leave Houston ISD that particularly, whenever struggles like that start happening in a school district, you see a lot of the kids that are performing the worst are some of the first to leave. And so it does make sense that especially whenever you're restructuring a student's entire schedule just to learn STAAR, but then also so many of your students are leaving, you have, more resources to pour into the fewer students that you have now to get them to pass STAAR. And you have a lot of those students who were the reason why you might have been getting DNF ratings. Now that they're gone, your scores can get higher. And so it is deceiving that to just say that Houston ISD, their numbers are going up, so it must be working.
And what they're going to do is present those numbers, like I said earlier, to other districts that aren't at risk of being taken over because they're not failing. But maybe they still have room for improvement, right? Like kind of mid-range. There are actually some districts that have, and this isn't something that we talked about earlier, but I just thought of it. There are some districts that have already implemented this new education system, Mike Miles' structure, that have not been taken over by the state because they don't want to be taken over by the state. So it's like a fear tactic. Cleveland ISD is one. I got a message today for anonymous tip. And anybody that messages me, they always preface with, I want to stay anonymous, because they fear for their jobs. Teachers, so anything a teacher ever tells me or anybody tells me, like, I would never reveal their identity. But this person, told me that Cleveland ISD has already lost students, and they have already have miserable students, miserable teachers, because they've implemented this system in an effort to avoid being taken over by TEA. And so, again, when we talk about students leaving the schools, that's the point, right? The point is, well, if you don't like the government school, go to the market.
Right.
But education is not supposed to be private. We've always had private schools, right? We've always had, but it's not supposed to be privatized to that extent where the public school is no longer a valuable community. Public schools are neighborhood. I like to call them neighborhood schools. Like they are community hubs. They are essential local infrastructure. They are not just about going and sitting and learning how to take a test. When a public school is thriving, the community is thriving. And I can say that because I live in a town where our public school is thriving because our community is involved, right? And but when you weaken that and you have people in the community that are just forced to go elsewhere, that weakens the whole community. It doesn't just weaken the school, it weakens the whole community. Yeah,
and talk about, you know, there are few tools more powerful for helping economically disadvantaged people transition from being, you know, lower class to middle class. There are few tools more powerful to help them make that transition than a high quality education. And it seems like that's primarily what the goal is that's the point. Republicans in Texas want poor people to go to public schools, to the dramatically underfunded, terrible, miserable public schools, and then all the middle and upper class kids, they get to go to private school, and we're going to continue to pull money out of the schools for poor kids and put it into the schools for rich kids, which is only going to economically disadvantage those people more and transfer more and more of their wealth from lower classes into middle and upper classes. And, you know, that's just a reality that we talk about it like, oh, that's their plan, that's coming. That's just the reality that exists in Texas now. Whenever you have 80% of whenever you have 80% of Texas public school students economically disadvantaged, then you're talking about, you know, the vast majority of Texas public school students are just the lower classes. And it's unfortunate because great presidents in the past have made public all of these institutions to help the working class get a leg up in our country. And unfortunately, all of those benefits have been slowly eroded.
Well, and all of this kind of traces also back to racism, right? We go back to desegregation. Brown v. the Board of Education required that public schools had to desegregate across the U.S. And so there was a process of getting schools to get into compliance. They had to sometimes, there was different ways they did it, like lottery systems where, you know, busing students, but it did take a couple of decades for schools to get into compliance. And Beaumont ISD is one that didn't fully desegregate until the 1970s, and there was a lot of dragging their feet and lawsuits. And I've already heard, as I'm making these videos, as I'm, you know, talking about this, speaking out, I've heard many people in my comments that have said things like, oh, Beaumont went down when South Park and Beaumont ISD combined, and what they're referring to is when they desegregated. Like, they're just coming out and saying the quiet part out loud. And so then these voucher models are also based on efforts after Brown v. the Board of Education, when the white supremacists did not want their kids to go to school with black and brown kids. And so a lot of states, like there's in Virginia, they started giving government grants to go to a private school. What does that sound like? They called it a grant, a voucher. And then their schools wound up shutting down because their whole public school system collapsed in that town in Virginia in the 1950s after Brown v. the Board of Education, because everybody just left. And so this whole voucher system is modeled, and the system that we've been talking about, new education system, is modeled after resistance to desegregation efforts.
100%.
We're just being drugged backwards, and it's in line with how we're being drugged backwards in other areas like voting rights, and
100%. Yeah, it's very scary. It's scary that, you know, so many people in our country have less rights today than our grandparents did.
Mhm.
we are slowly slipping into some pretty dark times ahead politically. And yeah, originally the whole push for private schools was a segregationist tactic because private schools could still segregate. Bob Jones schools didn't integrate till like the 70s
Yeah,
because it took them whenever they finally integrated Beaumont public schools wasn't until like the 90s.
yeah.
It took a long time for these schools to finally integrate. People don't recognize how recently that was. And now, of course, now they're not going to say, oh yeah, we accept everyone and we accept people equally. But very conveniently, the majority of private school students in Texas are white, and the
Hmm.
majority of public school students in Texas are black and brown.
And a
What does
lot
that
of
sound like?
choosing a private school is about being able to choose your student population. It's less so about I mean, I guess maybe for some people it might be about the academics, but for a lot and of course there are religious reasons. I don't want to leave that out. There are definitely valid religious reasons. There's
Sure.
Catholic schools, there's Islam schools. I mean, my kids went to a Catholic school for a while when I taught at a Catholic school, and we competed at PSIA. There was Iman Academy in Houston that totally blew
Hmm.
us out of the water at every academic event. They were amazing. But there is a group of people who choose private school because they want to curate their student population, and these schools, or they want to choose a school that can curate the population. And that you might see that kids are getting expelled for behavioral issues, whereas this kid whose parent is usually a white kid whose parent is a big donor, they have behavior problems and they're not getting expelled. But
Hmm.
this kid is getting. I mean, that's something that is a reality.
Because private schools can they're private companies. They can just make decisions like that,
Yeah,
without
if you don't like it, take your business elsewhere.
100%, vote with your dollars or whatever. And that's what's so unfortunate about it all. I'm not saying either that there's not a time and a place for some private schools. I think that is a fine thing. But whenever you have the state taking huge resources away from public education and shoveling it into the wallets of these private companies that run these private schools, all you're doing is making education less and less accessible for people. It's just like healthcare. It's so frustrating. Everybody's like, oh, we should have free healthcare. We should have free healthcare. Right now, we have free schools. We have public schools.
Yeah.
And that's slowly being taken away from us in the exact same way that our private healthcare system excludes people, and it means that people don't get the healthcare that they need. So
Mm-hmm.
too, whenever our education system is completely privatized, will people be excluded and people not get the education that they need? And that, I mean,
Public schools
that's just what
very
they
much
want.
compared to the Medicaid system, right? Like if you're,
Yeah.
I know a lot of people. So I'm in an online. I have 6 kids and I have 2 little ones, 2 toddlers. So I'm in like online mom groups and local mom groups. And a lot of times the moms will ask questions like, "I'm pregnant. Which doctor in our area accepts Medicaid?" And so they're very limited on their choices of like OB. Whether or
Yep.
not they can use like a midwife, choose their own birthing options. They're very much limited on these choices because they have the government insurance. Whereas if it was expanded to everybody that had that option, there would be more of an incentive for, because some doctors or even dentists, things like that, they will be like, well, we don't take Medicaid patients. We don't want to deal with all that. And so then so then if we compare that to education, it's going to be the same thing. The people that have to choose the government school because of poverty are going to be very limited on the education they receive. Whereas if we just made public goods accessible to everybody, despite income, then we would all have the incentive to make them good, right?
Hmm.
Um, and so that's,
100%.
I think Hillary Clinton made the argument one time against Bernie Sanders. Do you want to give
Yeah.
Donald Trump's kids free college? And my answer would be yes.
Yes.
My answer would be yes, because if that's fine, because they can choose to use it or they can choose not to use it. But if we all had access to the same public goods, we'd all want to make it good. If it's only associated with the people who need it, the people who are in poverty, we're not going to make it good. Does that kind of make sense? So
100%. And it
yeah,
makes it easier for wealthier donors and wealthier lobbyists to lobby for those organizations to go away. Whenever, an organization is only there to service, poor people instead of rich people or middle class people, then a huge portion of the population doesn't get to experience the benefits of that public good. But whenever a public good benefits everybody, middle class people, get to ride free transit or get to send their kids to college for free or get to have a benefit from free healthcare, then you're going to see a huge portion of the population come out and defend it when they avail themselves of it enough to appreciate it. And that's what's scary, is the more that education becomes privatized, the less and less people experience the benefits of public school. The less beneficial public school is, because it gets less and less funding, and it gets less and less students and less teachers. Whenever you see those benefits go away and people stop experiencing the benefits, they say, well, why are we supporting this at all? And then it's gone.
Now, there is a wild card, I think, in Texas that we can still play. I didn't mention this to you before. I just thought of it, but I mentioned this to the guy I was talking to earlier. There is a wild card that just might save public education in Texas, and even among conservative communities, maybe even especially among. And I think that it's very ironic, almost humorous, kind of like a movie. Football, Friday Night Lights.
Okay.
Texas has a huge Friday Night Lights culture, especially in those small, the school district my kids go to and that I went to, huge football culture, right? And that's across, then we have like mid-county madness between it's huge, right? So and then you have parents that they're sending their kids to the particular district. They want them to play on the football team. They want them to be, it's almost a legacy thing. They want them to be on the drill team, all those things, right? That is very much a Texas culture. We criticize it a lot, and it is, you spend more money on your football than your arts, and absolutely valid. As an English teacher, absolutely valid. However, will these communities that are so rooted in their football culture be willing to see their public school wither away? Mm-hmm. And so I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud when I say that. I don't know how that rhetoric can be spun.
Sure.
But that we see that even Friday night football culture is also very much associated with conservatives, right? Those communities. Not in every, but in a lot of times it's associated with that. So that might be it might save us. Or it might save some. I don't know. I'm just speaking out loud on that. I don't know where that's going, but I just thought it might be a wild card. We might, maybe Friday Night Light culture will be our saving grace some way, somehow. So
hopefully. Do you have time for one more question? We've gone over the amount of time that we talked about talking for, but we have to talk about, because I didn't get to talk about it last time. Okay. I don't know what I was thinking. It completely dropped my mind that your opponent, should you win your runoff right now, which early voting for the runoff starts on May 18th, and then the runoff itself is on May 28th. That's the election date. So you want to make sure to save those dates in your calendar. But should you win your runoff, in the fall, you will go up against Julie Pickren, who is our current State Board of Education rep for District 7.
Yes.
Who was at January 6th.
A J6er sitting on the board.
A January 6th insurrectionist is one of our 15 State Board of Education representatives, our State Board of Education representative. And she was at the Capitol being we
God bless America.
God bless America. Yeah. They're storming. And then later she was actually, that was Antifa who was storming the Capitol. You were there. What are you talking about? And that cost her race. People say that cost her race. And
yeah, she was voted off the Alvin IC school board because I think it was the NAACP that led the charge in calling her out for violating her oath to the Constitution, is what they said. And they used her Facebook posts at January 6th as evidence. And you can go and look up those stories. And so what happened after that is, so during those 4 years that we kind of took a sigh of relief for a little bit of normalcy to be restored
Yeah.
after the election of Joe Biden. They planned their comeback, and they did things like get onto school boards and get into the state board of education. And I mean, it was smart. It was smart. They packed school boards. I have to give them at least credit for, their strategy, right? Not their ideology, certainly not, but their strategy. They packed school boards.
Yeah.
They got a J6er on the State Board of Education. They opened, there's a PAC called the Texas for Educational Freedom PAC, which doles out tens of thousands of dollars to school board candidates, which are supposed to be nonpartisan, and State Board of Education candidates. And they also own a consulting company where they kind of train, or I even use the word groom, candidates to be to be MAGA representatives in school boards, and again on the State Board of Education. You can even go to CAZ Consulting's website, and that will show you that's one of the things that they boast is flipping the Texas, not flipping because it was already a Republican majority, but making it more heavily MAGA instead of
you've got Pickering on there, you got Hall on there. Just crazy MAGA people, and like
Hall
literally
is very much a proponent of the Fort Worth takeover, and now we see why.
Literally, Hall and Pickering were the ones who a representative from CARE came. They've been rewriting the social studies TEKS and want to include all this ridiculous like Islamophobic rhetoric in the social studies TEKS, and a representative from CARE, which is the Council on American Islamic Relations, came to talk at the SBOE meeting and say, hey, we don't want this. We shouldn't be doing this. And Pickering and Hall were like, we're not talking to people who are from terrorist organizations, and walked out of the school board meeting, didn't even, the State Board of Education meeting, didn't even listen to her.
Very performative. They go out in the hallway and they make a video about how they are not listening to a terrorist demand. So they're calling public comment a demand letter. Whenever you have 2 minutes to give public comment at the State Board of Education, that's part of the democratic process. But I think Brandon Hall said, I don't take demands from terrorists. So he's using that language, deliberately using that language, demands. And Pickering went out in the hallway. So the person's in there testifying, giving her comment. She's in the hallway holding the comment because they pass it out to the board members before they read it. And saying, I have her list of demands right here. Just very performative. That is not a demand letter. This is public comment, the most boring part of our democracy, right? You would think. I mean, and then she starts making up things that are on it. Like, I got my hands on the actual letter, and it didn't say anything about, it referenced some, so the Alamo, they're making this huge deal about the Alamo and how they want to Islamify the Alamo. All that was said is that the Alamo is Spanish architecture style, and Spanish architectural style was heavily influenced by the Moors in Spain. That's it.
Right.
That's a very basic historical fact of architecture, and they're blowing it up to say, and now marketing them as we're taking back the Alamo from the Muslims.
Oh my God.
You're not.
Yeah, God forbid we include one line that's just factually correct. Muslims controlled a large amount of Spain, and so therefore a lot of Spanish architecture is informed by Muslim culture, and because the Spanish colonized the Americas, we built the Alamo in the style of Spanish architecture. I can't speak today. Sorry. Architecture. Literally they won't let us acknowledge the ways that Islamic communities preserved like philosophers' writings during the Dark Ages. We can't talk about how algebra was invented by Islamic communities. Algebra is a Muslim. It's an Arabic word.
Our number system is Arabic.
It's crazy. Not allowed to acknowledge any of that because, God forbid, the less than 2% of the Texas population that's Muslim, though they're radicals and they're trying to take over the state. It's crazy. You've seen crazy Islamophobic rhetoric this election cycle. And Julie Pickering has been a big part of that.
Yeah, and it's every accusation. It's a confession, because who is actually trying to take over the education curriculum? There was a $70,000 payment from the Texas Public Policy Foundation, which is a conservative think tank they market themselves as nonpartisan because they're a C3, but they're not nonpartisan, like complete propaganda, rhetoric, all those things. $70,000 payment from them to Dr. Frazier with in his at Schreiner University. He heads this department at Schreiner University. So a $70,000 payment to him. He was one of the appointed content advisors because the board members got to appoint content advisors to advise in the TEKS rewrite process, but they weren't actually advising. They were actually steering the ship, basically, and the teachers were sidelined because the law requires teacher input. So they were doing it in letter of the law, but not spirit of the law, right? So if you look at the tax documents, that this is, what was pulled, their tax documents, public record, that $70,000 payment on the memo line is Texas essential knowledge and skills.
Right.
And it's right there. And we have tried, and the 5 Democrat members of the State Board of Education have tried to press. We got this information during the 17 hours of public testimony on that day of the board meeting. And Hall and Pickering called a point of order to silence member Perez Diaz, Democrat San Antonio, because she got these tax documents in her hand, and there was somebody up there testifying. She used her time to ask about the $70,000 payment because I think they were connected to that. And Hall and Pickering continually called a point of order. And of course, that in these meetings, the way that works, then the chairman has the deciding. Well, the chairman, Aaron Kinsey, he's MAGA.
Yeah.
And he's also connected to the Texas Public Policy Foundation. But they so aggressively, you can go rewatch the state. I'll try to clip it. The State Board of Education meeting from that day. Hall and Pickering very aggressively kept calling a point of order on member Perez Diaz for trying to ask about the $70,000 payment. So what are they trying to hide? What was that $70,000 used for? Well, we know what it was used for. And I've been calling the chairman of the Committee of Public Education to do a hearing. And maybe when we flip Texas blue this November, we get a new attorney general in there, we can actually pursue this. And so that's really something that I want to emphasize, especially before we end this. I need to emphasize that everything that has been said tonight shows that it is more, this election this November in Texas is more important now than ever for public school, because the education commissioner, Mike Morath, who is appointing these superintendents and leading these takeovers. First of all, the education commissioner is appointed, not elected, which is insane. Our ag commissioner is elected. Our railroad commissioner is elected. But the education commissioner that has all this power is appointed. And he's now the longest serving because Greg Abbott has been in office for so long. So we get a new governor. And Gina Inosa has said, day one, we fire Mike Morath. And if we fire Mike Morath, then that can end the occupation in all these school districts. It can shut all of this that we've talked about tonight down. We get a new lieutenant governor. They decide what bills, what legislation is going to be heard in the Texas Senate. And the lieutenant governor is actually in a runoff. So that's going to help my
Vicki
runoff.
Goodwin and Marcus Velez.
Yeah. So that's going to help down ballot runoffs, because we have 2 top ticket runoffs. The attorney general is also in a runoff. Joe Jaworski and Nathan.
And Johnson.
So I just want to impress on everybody that public education is on the ballot, blue up and down the ballot. This is not a game. This is not a drill. We need a new governor. We need to fire Mike Morath. We need legislation to make the education commissioner elected and not appointed. This is also happening in higher education, so we have a lot of work to do there. So we need 5 seats. We need a new governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general. We need to flip 5 seats in the state and 14 seats in the House and 3 seats on the State Board of Education. And the 3 seats on the State Board of Education is absolutely doable, because since it's a smaller board, only 15, there's 10-5 right now. If we hold the seats we currently have and flip 3, District 2 might flip. That one's a very flippable one. That's Thomas Ray Garcia over in the Corpus Christi, Rio Grande Valley area. He's running against somebody who is very much ideologically aligned with this MAGA extremism. And he's running a great campaign. My district is flippable, 7. Now, it's going to be a harder uphill climb because of some of the very red areas that we have in District 7, which is by design when they draw the maps. But it is. But we're going to do this. We're going to do this. And then District 8, is also flippable. So that's actually right next to us, Baytown, some parts of Houston. Dana Vandy Walker and I have been collaborating a lot because our districts are neighbors.
Awesome.
3 seats on the State Board of Education. We can secure a non-MAGA majority.
Yeah. And that's incredible because, I mean, we've seen how much damage they've been able to do, just in the last few years here. They're only planning to ratchet this up and go even further and harder after the midterms. And so any Democrat that we can get into positions of power to be able to, push back on this is going to be super valuable. But the more Democrats we get into positions of power that can network their power together, you rely on, people in the administration and people in the legislature to assist you in your effort to, resist ideological extremism, moving into the curriculum on the State Board of Education. Yes. So yeah, the more that people show up and vote down ballot blue, the faster we'll be able to stem the tide of this insane Republican extremism.
If nothing else, if we get a new governor, she can veto these extremist, laws that are going through. So even if we don't flip the Senate and the House, which we hope we do, but if we could just get Gina Enosa in there. So I think I really need everybody to. The governor's race has gotten less attention compared to the Senate race, and I'm glad the Senate race is getting attention because it is important. And because his message against Christian nationalism is so important. However, for the future of Texas, we have to all rally behind Gina Enosa. Even if you can only donate $5 to her campaign, if you can volunteer for her campaign, if you can knock doors for her, if you can just tell everybody you know about her. She is a fighter for education. So she got into politics because her son's school was going to close. So she got onto the school board. And you remember we heard that when she came talking Beaumont. And that's what we're facing now. So she's going to be that fighter that we need. And I had an Ann Richards quote book right in front of me, but it's just like
the last time Texas public schools had any level of sense governing them.
This lady right here. We're going to make her proud.
100%. Well, Tiffany, thank you so much for being here again. Again, those election dates, early voting starts on May 18th, and then election day is May 28th, correct? Or 26th?
Yes, 26th, May 26th. So
26th,
yes. 22nd for early voting, and then May 26th.
That's right. So make sure that you show up and
what happened.
100%. Yeah. All kind of shenanigans Republicans are trying to pull all over the state. So 100% get out, vote early, and vote for Tiffany Perkins because I'm so excited to flip Texas. And we're going to flip. We're going to get Jolie Pickering out of there. There's no way. Like, people are so tired of these Republican shenanigans. They already got rid of Jolie Pickering the last time whenever they found out that she was on, that she went to January 6th. They got her off of Alvin ISD school board. We can certainly get her out of the State Board of Education, especially since she's been continuing all the ridiculous same shenanigans on the State Board of Education.
Definitely. Yeah, we're going to do this. And if anybody wants to help or volunteer for my campaign, just reach out to me. I can take all the help I can get, boots on the ground. 100%. Because District 7 is 11 counties. So.
Yeah, 100%. And people right here in Beaumont, in the Jefferson County area, I know that that's also a big area that you're making a big push in. Any help that you can get, you're welcome to DM me. You're welcome to DM Tiffany's campaign. And we absolutely can figure out a way to make even bigger of a push here. So, thank you so much for being here, Tiffany. Appreciate you. Have any last words before we sign off?
I think, my little sermon at the end about flew up and down the ballot. This is our chance. We could lose public education for a generation. It's just so important. So, time, talent, or treasure. As a Catholic, that's what the Catholics, they don't say, just donate, because not everybody can donate money. They understand that. So they say, just give your time, talent, and treasure. So I'm going to adopt that phrase. If you don't have treasure, money to give to a campaign, then your time and your talent. But it's all hands on deck. So
100%. Well, Tiffany, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate you. Everybody in the chat, thank Tiffany for being here. And
so much.
we will see you on May 26th. And but more importantly, during early voting starting on May 18th. So thank you so much. And we'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.